Boutique Podcast is a show for mature audiences only. Listen at your own peril. Landing now at the Piece of Junk Studios in Lexington, Kentucky, a cornucopia of nerd culture with news and reviews from the genres of comics, science fiction, horror, gaming, and even a little cosplay. It's the Geeks Boutique Podcast. And now, here's your hosts, JD, Zach, and Jason!
Geeks Assemble! Today we bring you episode number 2 of the Geeks Boutique Podcast. I know what you're thinking on your feed. Technically this is episode number 3, but the previous one was just a short bonus episode we recorded because we were all so eager to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah, mini-sode.
Yeah, a little mini-sode. That you don't count that. This is episode number 2. So as usual, in this issue, we will whip out our comic book dick pics of the month and discuss Captain America and the Secret Empire and Beyond the Pages. In the mausoleum, we welcome in our first ever guest host, Dr. Tom Marksberry, to talk about his unique teaching resume. In Hillbillies on Film, we will discuss the new direction in horror films and get Dr. Marksberry's take on them. Then we'll step into Zach's cosplay closet for a report from the Steampunk Symposium in Cincinnati, Ohio. After that, we'll debut a brand new segment, the Imperial Security Bureau, where we talk about all things X-Wings miniatures game related. All this and more on this month's Geeks Boutique. Okay, quick announcement. D20 Hobbies here in Lexington wanted us to mention that they'll be hosting a mummy-themed event at the Regal Hamburg Cinemas June 9th through June 11th. The new Mummy film, starring Tom Cruise, will be coming out that weekend, and D20 will be set up in the lobby to offer free gaming demos of the newest Magic the Gathering release, Amonkhet. Amonkhet is set in a highly Egyptian-themed and inspired plane and should pair nicely with the new film. If you're interested, you can be a returning gamer to Magic or wanting to learn for the first time ever, just stop by June 9th from 5 to 10 p.m., that's the Friday, and then again on Saturday, June 20th from 12 to 10 p.m., and again on June 11th, the Sunday, from 12 to 8. Some of the Geeks Boutique lads will also be hanging around, so be sure to drop by and say hello! Okay, guys, this is exciting. We've got our first ever listener question of the month.
All right.
Yeah, listener and friend of the show, David Faulkner, wrote in to pose a question to the Geeks. Basically, he wanted to know if we believe that Marvel has had so much success with its films because of their good casting choices. Maybe you can compare and contrast that with DC Comics. You know, their stuff has been more lukewarm as far as reception. Hadn't been hitting out of the park as much. Do you think it's casting or something more than that?
Well, I think it's writing.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with directors.
Yeah.
On this one, and I mean, yeah, maybe some of the casting stuff. Looking at Batman versus Superman, where they had what's his name, Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, and a much more
that was bloody horrible.
Yeah, I mean that's what 2.5, 3 hours of my life that I will never get back again. I'd rather stuck a spork in my eye than sit down and watch that again.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. I mean, yeah, the cast is good, and I feel like the people that they've picked to play the characters in the Marvel movies are really great actors and really great in the role that they're for. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot more of the directing stuff. Look at Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I mean,
James Gunn's
got it figured out, like I said last time in the little mini-sode. He can direct every Marvel movie from now on.
Absolutely.
As far as I care.
The only thing that I can say about the Marvel casting stuff, I think it was genius to cast Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. It was absolute genius.
Well, he is Tony Stark.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he's just, Robert Downey Jr. in any movie is not a character. He's Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
And I think that was perfect. I agree.
Yeah, he's great. He's really good in it. He's so charismatic, and really he is. I think he's just playing himself. But it really translates well. And they've used him as a thread throughout all of the movies.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, he's like...
Including the next Spider-Man film.
Yeah, I mean, he is the bonding force for that whole continuum of stories, without a doubt.
I mean, you kind of going back to the director comment, within DC's kind of own realm, you look at the Christopher Nolan runs of, Batman movies versus now that, Zack Snyder, now that he's taken over kind of the Justice League Batman stuff, it's really taken a whole different turn as far as being, lucrative for DC. Yeah. You're not seeing nearly the response. People aren't losing their mind over
right.
Batman versus Superman and Suicide Squad like they were with the Christopher Nolan run of Batman movies.
Of course, the new Justice League movie too I don't know how good it's going to be, but they're over budget. They're doing a lot of refilming. I know these big movies, they always set aside money to do reshoots and that kind of thing. But I think they're having some issues right now in the post-production of that flick.
Reshoots as in like they were wanting to go back and change things, or reshoots as in the scene just wasn't done correctly?
Well, there were no specifics. Whenever you hear that kind of thing coming out of those studios, they don't want to get too specific because they're worried about how it's going to affect their box office. So, but definitely the problems continue. They're cursed. And with our horror theme related podcast, I believe DC may be cursed.
I'm gonna leap in here with a bold prediction that the Wonder Woman film is gonna be pretty damn good.
I agree. Like I think that's going to be a strong female character done very well, and it's not. I don't think it's going to be like in your face. Oh, look at me, I'm a strong female character. I think it's just going to be a great character, regardless of it being female.
I thought she was the best part of that last Batman v Superman movie.
Oh hell yeah!
And standing on, and Chris Pine, I like Chris Pine, so
Chris Pine's awesome.
Yeah. I can never remember his name. He will always be that guy in Star Trek.
His dad was a character actor, and he played the captain on the old TV show Chips.
That guy.
Chris
Okay,
Pine's
yeah.
dad, yeah. He played the captain. It was over Ponch, and what was his partner's name?
Lefty.
That's it.
Nice.
Right.
Ponch and Lefty.
That's from Tom Marksberry, our horror expert.
Yeah, he's sitting in, so if you hear any comments from him from time to time, he's here with us already.
Okay.
Cool. So I got a little piece also. We inadvertently kind of were having beers and had a conversation about the character Cyclops, leader of the X-Men, right?
Yes.
Charles Xavier's chosen field leader, at least, of the X-Men, and about how nobody really likes him.
He's the Boy Scout of the group.
Yeah.
He wants to be. That's the way he was set up, right, John?
He was, and then as the old time comic book guy here, Cyclops was always like Captain America. I mean, he led the X-Men. He always had a plan. He was like an Eagle Scout, and I mean, he was not, you couldn't be critical about him in any way, shape, or form in the old days. But somewhere along the line, that they changed that character. I always loved Captain America as a kid. Same thing with Cyclops. He was like the mini Captain America for the X-Men team. So.
I had a theory that we honestly just came up with here in pre-production, that maybe it was because of Wolverine. I think he became by far the most popular character.
Sure.
And, of course, he was kind of always opposed to Cyclops because of the three-way romantic involvement with Jean Grey, the Phoenix and all that. And I think all of that's a goody two-shoesiness. Is that a word?
Yeah, it is now. I mean, you think about the English language, most of the shit's made up, so... Yeah, it is word now.
I think the audience in general started identify more with Wolverine, the anti-hero, as opposed to the classic straight guy. And maybe that also kind of helped to diminish his popularity some.
Yeah. There was a few defining moments in comic history as it regards those anti-heroes. And, Wolverine in that early teens run, I can't remember if it's 113, 114, where the X-Men are in Savage Land. Wolverine, for the first time that I could remember, from the time that I started reading comics, in 1973, 74, up until that happened, no comic book superhero had ever killed anyone. And Wolverine kills someone off panel, and they show, and it's weird, it really has an effect on you, even though you don't actually see him do it. And they show the reaction of Storm, and her eyes get really big in the next panel, and she says something to the effect that, my God, he's like a lion of the great veldt. You know what I mean? And from that point forward, it was all everybody was all in then for all the anti-hero stuff.
Problem solved, problem stayed solved.
Yeah.
So I think maybe Wolverine being Cyclops' foil may have also kind of diminished his...
But can we step back and look for a second that we, talking about we were having beers, we were all rooting for the fact that Wolverine was nailing Scott Summers' girlfriend.
I never rooted for that. That little Canadian bastard.
It's her choice, man. But, okay, so I got this article off of Looper.com by Andy Kubai. The title is How Cyclops Became the Most Hated Marvel Character. That might be a bit extreme, but he makes some good points. Especially when it comes to Cyclops' love life, because you've always got Jean Grey popping off here and there, dying. At one point, Mr. Sinister made a clone of her, and this was when I was a heavy X-Men fan back in the 80s. Cloned Jean Grey. The lady's name was Madeline Pryor. She became the Goblin Queen eventually. He hooked up with her. He's gotten involved with Emma Frost more recently. And, as soon as Jean Grey's off the radar, he's on to the next skirt, and... maybe that's not the most heroic thing to do.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, he's definitely a dick now, I guess, in in those terms. But I mean, he wasn't in the beginning. Kind of like how they're doing with this Secret Empire stuff with Cap.
Completely different comic book Dick than we are, though. Let's let the record note.
Right.
So why were they saying he is the most hated?
Well, some more topics. He keeps choosing work over family.
Yeah.
Moves on remarkably soon after the love of his life dies multiple times. Left his wife her genetic duplicate. Psychically cheated on Jean Grey with
Whoa. That's like, if you have a dream that you're hooking up with a woman and your wife is mad at you now that you dreamt about hooking up with another woman. Whoa.
Hey, if you sin in your heart. He's always sympathetic when the Phoenix reappears.
And it's kind of his woman, though, yeah.
During the X-Men versus Avengers series, he was the one that ended up killing Professor X. Some of the X-Men took over fractions of the Phoenix's power and got super powerful, and Cyclops was one of them, and he did that pretty willingly. And in that timeline, in that story, he killed Professor X.
Oh, it's just bullshit.
That's definitively a dick move.
So on and so forth. He's responsible for a lot of the hostilities of the Inhumans more recently. So, yeah, not a Boy Scout. Not in the classic Captain America sense, anyway.
That's a shame.
If you'd like to contact us with your questions, please write us one of our many social media sites. If we like what we hear, we'll be sure to mention you and your query on the show.
Psst. Hey, buddy. Come over here. Comic Book Dicks is our comic segment. It's the place where we each dive into our local comic shop and try to sleuth out a good read amongst the rubbish. We might be behind the 8 ball, so you better holster your piece gumshoe. We've got work to do.
Okay, guys, let's get on with our dick pics of the month. This is truly the meat of our show, I believe. Zach, can I see your dick pic?
You can always see my dick pics, Jason.
Yeah,
I'll say, for this one, it was actually literally ran out, pretty much pre-production. And snatched up the Punisher number 7. And in this one, it's actually following right after the Punisher has started kind of attacking some of Condor facilities. And they're kind of like a mercenary group in a sense. And they've been doing a lot of a drug trade. Well, I guess they've kind of introduced into the Marvel Universe this drug, EMC. They never really say what that stands for, but essentially it's kind of like a super performance enhancing drug that makes them incredibly powerful, resistant to pain, incredibly strong. And in the issue before this, I suppose that he's just destroyed one of their production facilities and was actually buried underneath it. And it's underneath an old cemetery, so it starts out him crawling out from underneath the grave, coming from there. It doesn't really set up a whole lot in the comic. It was okay, but really it's just kind of, I guess it's setting up more things down the road. But in this one, it's just he's kind of climbed up out from the grave and where he was buried under, and he's tracked down 2 of the guys that have a bounty on him and fights them. And I think this one was more to show the effects of EMC, because in one of the panels, he's in this bar and he's fighting one of the guys that's out to collect the bounty on him. Well, the guy shoots up with this drug, and now his eyes are all bloodshot and he's crazed looking. At one point, they set him on fire and he's still fighting like it's nothing. They impale him with various objects. At one point, the Punisher breaks a bottle, shoves it in his neck, and now you've got this stream of blood come out of this wand ball. Very gruesome, very gory, very entertaining comic. It just doesn't have a whole lot of story advancement going through it.
Right.
And it actually, one of the final panels is he's fighting this guy that's all jacked up on this EMC drug out in the woods, and there just happens to be a deer skeleton laying there, and he throws him back on it and impales him on the antlers of this deer. And then it shows him going to this seemingly abandoned farmhouse at the end of it, and this old kind of blonde-eyed looking woman has him at gunpoint. That's the end of the comic. So it's not a very long issue. It doesn't set up a whole lot of really great story, but it seems like it's more kind of expanded upon what this drug, the EMC drug, will do.
Yeah, been a lot of comic stories based around drugs that are similar to steroids. Like Venom comes to mind almost
Could this
immediately.
be like a reflexive reference to EC Comics, though? EMC, please.
Oh, enlighten me.
I mean,
Right.
it's these 50s comics books that were censored.
Yeah.
Huh.
By the those congressional hearings, was it Vertum or Vertime trials? where they censored all of the titles, like they had to take out words like terror and horror.
This guy wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent
That's
that
it,
said
right.
that comic books ruined everybody. So I think EMC is kind of a wink to that.
Could be, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, even on the cover it says, parental advisory not for kids in big bold letters. So that immediately drew me to it. I was like, this is going to be perfect. But that is a very interesting point, though.
Absolutely.
And where they're trying, I guess, rehash some of these characters and bring some of the stuff, they could be making a jab at some of the older prohibitions on comics and what they could have in there. Because this one, even for Punisher, is very just pretty over the top in terms of gruesomeness. Like he shoots out a guy's eye with the top of this wine bottle at one point. I was like, it's almost harkens back to like a grindhouse. The 1960s and 70s films in terms of just kind of the sheer over-the-top goriness to it. It's an interesting comic for sure.
Absolutely. Okay.
Eddie, what do you got for us?
I've got Girl Scouts, GRRL Scouts, Girl Scouts Magic Socks. Okay.
Go on.
Yeah, this is a property that was created by Jim Mahfood. He's a writer and artist. He's the writer and artist on this book. He's been in comics, since the late 90s, early 90s. Actually, the Girl Scouts property has been around since 1995. He started working on this book before he actually graduated from the Kansas Art Institute, like in 1997. He's done books. Jim Mahfood has done books. I know you'll be familiar with some things. He's done some art duties on Tank Girl, the Clerks comics for Kevin Smith, Howard the Human, and Marijuana Man for Ziggy Marley. Not to mention he's done some commercial products too, like he did some designer cans for Colt 45. I don't know if anybody's ever seen those. But
Billy D. Williams.
They're really
Designer cans.
Yeah, they're really
Wow.
they're really fucking cool.
Somebody somewhere right next to their commemorative NASCAR plates has designer Colt 45 bottles
Hopefully
right
one of our
there.
listeners is drinking from one of those as we speak.
Or just has it enshrined above the, but on the mantle somewhere.
Right. Just to give you a brief history of what the Girl Scouts are, basically they're like these three girls, and they have this outrageous, like hip-hop punk style, and they have a really gangster attitude. There are three girls. One of them's named Rita. She's the artistic one. She does graffiti. And then there's Daphne. She's like the hard-partying, freewheeling gal, loves to dance and, take ecstasy. And then you've got Gwen, who's like this hardcore gangster fighter. And what they do is they live in a city called Freak City, and they peddle marijuana in cookie boxes, Girl Scouts, right? And to any rivals that cross their path, they are met with severe hurt and or death as a result of these girls. The book is almost like, a lot of books are almost like the 70s black exploitation movies, to be honest. I mean, like in one of the original stories, they went up against a villain or a group of villains called the Brotherhood of the Cracker. Okay. And
Saltines of Justice.
right. And at the end of that story, it just so happened that the leader of the Brotherhood of the Cracker was in fact the devil. Okay?
The devil, capital D.
Yeah, the devil, the capital D devil. And so, I mean, it's almost like watching a Quentin Tarantino movie in a lot of ways. Some of these things, but they are a flashback to like what I would call 70s exploitation films. And there's definitely a supernatural feel now that runs through the property. Obviously they fought the devil at the end of that series. So the newest comic, Girl Scouts Magic Socks, the girls have been separated since their last adventure, and Daphne is wearing some sort of magic socks that somehow are like these super weapons. I'm not quite sure as to the extent of how the powers work because of these socks. But she definitely does some high-kicking, kick-ass fighting in this book, and they've yet to reveal the full extent of the magic socks that Daphne's wearing. And evidently her cousin is in pursuit of her for these magic socks. All the while, the girls have reunited, and of course, they still deal marijuana and Girl Scout cookie boxes. As far as the art's concerned, I just have to say Jim Mahfood, his art is just simply eye-popping. There's a distinct graffiti feel that he puts into his art, and it's almost like what I would call to me, graffiti is like almost the purest freestyle form of art. And the energy is definitely there in the book. You kind of sometimes you think of Bill Sienkiewicz. I don't know, guys are familiar with Electra Assassin, Bill Sienkiewicz, the old comic book artist from like the early 80s and still does work. As a matter of fact, I think he did a variant cover for this new title. My Food's storytelling abilities, his writing, his layout, they're just fantastic. I mean, your eye wanders, from one incredible vision to the next with an intense, almost like frenetic energy. And then finally, Justin Stewart, our local comic book professional, lays down the color job on this thing. It can only be described as visceral and almost brilliant in a lot of ways. So you can't go wrong with this one. And to add to all that, Diamond State Distributors sold out on this #1 issue nationally.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. So that was my dick pick
Okay.
of the episode.
Well, we're going to bring back the Punisher again. I picked up a trade paperback called Seventh Circle. It's a Daredevil Punisher title. It collects the first 4 issues of Daredevil Punisher by Charles Sewell, the writer, and I'm going to mess the name up, but Simon Kudransky. Basically, we're talking kind of classic Daredevil Punisher kind of thing. If you enjoyed season 2 of the Netflix series Daredevil and all of his interactions with Frank Castle, then you should go read this because it's pretty much entire trade paperback of that. They're at odds with each other because Matt Murdock is trying to extradite a prisoner to Texas to stand trial because he doesn't believe he can get a fair trial in New York. Of course, the Punisher just wants to kill the guy. So while they're trying to transport this guy, the Punisher's trailing him the whole way and trying to just kill the fella. And Daredevil keeps stopping every chance he gets. And of course, they have their arguments about what's the right way and what's the wrong way. They talk about, how they see things, their point of view. So it's kind of just one rollicking fight for the entire trade paperback as the Daredevil's trying to keep him from, accomplishing his end goal. There's a really good scene near the end, and if you want to go out and read it, then this would be a spoiler alert for you. But the Punisher's beaten again. Of course, Daredevil gets the edge on him. And he's like, you're just a tool of Matt Murdock, not knowing that he's Matt Murdock.
You're right.
What do you think? And, Matt Murdock wants this guy dead just as bad as I do. So what are you talking about? He's like, well, he's sending him to Texas, right? They have the death penalty.
Yeah, that was my question. Is how bad do you have to fuck up
Right.
to where you're being extradited to Texas for a fair trial? Like, you have fucked up beyond all repair at this
Right.
point.
And so the Daredevil, being Matt Murdock, of course, knows that. And, it kind of leaves it hanging there. Like, does Matt Murdock know he's sending this guy to be killed legally? Whereas the Punisher's like, just let me do it right now. Yeah, I thought that kind of brought the whole tension throughout the whole book to like that final point at the end when you're kind of like, well, Punisher may have you on that one, pal.
I'm all about speed and efficiency. I mean, I'm kind of with the Punisher on this
Are
one.
you any less of a killer because you went through the right, loopholes or whatever to get there?
What is it? What do you think it is that has changed comic culture into such an acceptance of anti-heroes like the Punisher or Wolverine, for that matter? What do you think has happened in our society that's changed all that? I mean, we seem like we're obsessed with that kind of thing.
I think a lot of it's a break from the norm. I mean, you look at so many different situations within our society. If we'll just let the system handle it, in a lot of the situations, the system just doesn't work, and justice is not dispensed as people see it appropriately dispensed. And so when you've got these anti-heroes who are meting out some old school Wild West justice, I think there's to a degree that break from the norm that people find interesting and exciting.
Well, what happens when anti-heroes become such a convention that ossifies into a cliche that the question becomes, who are the anti-heroes? And then my fear is, what is the Ku Klux Klan the next cool thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I almost feel like you see a degree of that within the comic The Watchmen, to where, are these guys really heroes? I mean, you look at the character, the comedian, and a lot of the, what was it, set in 1964, correct me if I'm wrong, but like a lot of the protests against the anti-heroes and the vigilantes you see are really public kind of backlash against that. Because like you said, Dr. Marksberry, once they've gone so far as to be, they've kind of become their own villains through the goal of being heroes, and this anti-hero mindset, they just take it too far.
Yeah, the comedian is definitely a fascist.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt, that character is a fascist.
I mean, you look at...
what you end up with, obviously, is Donald Trump, who's like the Joker, who's now the president.
I almost feel like we're in like Old Man Logan now. We've divvied up, and Kingpin and Red Skull now have their own sections of America.
Yeah.
In our next segment, Beyond the Pages, the team discusses in-depth topics concerning the comics industry.
Okay, and Beyond the Pages this month, I wanted to kind of keep that conversation rolling. Honestly, I didn't see that segment go in that direction, but it's kind of set us up as a nice segue. I wanted to talk about Captain America. If you've been following any of the recent storylines in the Secret Empire story arc, Marvel has basically turned Cap into a double agent. He's basically, in the newest release, he is the ultimate head of Hydra. He's governs the United States in a very fascist sort of way. Book burnings, the whole 9 yards. The whole time we thought he was this great American hero. He was actually a Nazi and then now the head of Hydra. And it's all been a big ruse. Marvel has effectively, as far as we know right now, turned Captain America into the complete opposite of everything he used to stand for. And they're getting a lot of heat from it from their readership. Yeah, so much so that they've actually had to release a press release last week saying, just stick with it a little while longer. We promise things might come around.
So bring up to speed. I may have missed a little bit, because I remember seeing the initial reveal to where, to where it's got Captain on
Hail Hydra,
Hail Hydra right there, exactly. So that's kind of the last I saw. So has he taken over a degree of like leadership over the country under like a Hydra dominion? I've kind of, like I said, I've missed a little bit of the storyline.
He is essentially Hitler.
Yes, they've turned Captain America into a Nazi.
Captain America was always a Nazi.
Wow. Well, that's what they're saying.
I don't know. I mean, to a degree, I'm almost wondering if this isn't kind of like back to our first issue, kind of Marvel placating a little bit of, I don't want to say anti-Americanism, but a little bit of this of maybe America's not as great as we've always portrayed ourselves to be, and maybe they're trying to pander a little bit there. Maybe, like I said, maybe that's kind of where I'm leading. Not having read any of the stories, this is totally going in blind.
Dr. Marksberry, when you made that comment, I'm thinking of there was a quote from Oscar Wilde about a patriot. And I don't know, I don't remember it. I just
the Bob Dylan version of it is patriotism is the last refuge to which a scoundrel clings.
Wow.
I don't know my Wilde, but I know my Bob Dylan.
You're better for it. There is a superhero underground, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Tony Stark acting as he's an artificial intelligence version of Tony Stark that are leading a resistance. The other superpower people are being rounded up in internment camps. Cap's political enemies are being executed. It's full on North Korea and Cap's rule of the United States.
I'm not really familiar with the story yet. I mean, I plan on reading it because I want to see what everybody's talking about.
Yeah,
definitely.
But kind of like a train wreck, I guess. So I'm going to rubberneck on this whole Secret Empire thing. But doesn't Cap execute somebody close to him in the story? If I'm not mistaken.
Jones.
Yeah, Rick Jones.
Rick Jones.
Wow. I mean, that's just
Now,
crazy.
fill me in real quick. Who was Rick Jones?
Rick Jones was the guy that Bruce Banner saved from the Gamma Bomb.
Okay, I know who you're talking about now. Never mind. I'm tracking.
Yeah. But now I don't know if it's the same Rick Jones anymore. Back in the old days.
The olden times, when comics were on chisel and slate and,
Right.
and painted on the inside of caves.
That's who Rick Jones is. Yeah.
Okay. Why? That's my question. It's just why? Why all of a sudden?
I think it's Marvel taking a big political jab at the current state of affairs in the United States and using Cap, obviously as the scapegoat for that.
It's a good point. Maybe so.
I don't see how it could be anything other than that.
Right.
I mean, they are a political beast.
Right.
I've seen that.
Yeah, that's just the thing that I can't wrap my mind around. It was the first, one of the first appearances of Captain America that I can think of that I've seen is Captain literally punching Hitler in the face.
Right.
So I mean, he's this is America kicking ass and taking names, and now he's basically Hitler. I would like to see how did he go from being in this program to now he's an agent of Hydra? Like, how did he get there? That's what I want to know.
He always was.
The first movie about Captain America was a TV movie in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it starred J.P. Salinger's son.
Huh.
Matt Salinger was the first Captain America.
Wow.
So how did he, you said he was always an agent of Hydra. So, like, how did he get into Hydra? Like, did Hydra create him? Like, was that?
I'm not sure. I haven't read it yet.
Okay,
either.
that's what I was wondering.
Reading the article.
I have some concerns. I have questions. I wish to know more.
He was always a double agent. the version we knew of Captain America was kind of a retcon pulled off by the United States and their allies using the cosmic cube powers to warp time and whatever. But the whole time he's been a Hydra agent.
Yeah.
Double agent, triple agent? I don't know. I lose track.
Jack Kirby's rolling over in his grave.
I'm
so.
kind of wondering, though, if he's not a triple agent. But from what you've just told me, it's like, I couldn't imagine anybody being in that in deep enough cover to where they're taking over an entire nation and executing people. Like,
I would argue, again, rewinding the whole podcast so far, you've got a hero, an established hero like Captain America, who is really just a big ideal writ large. Like when shit's going to hell in a handbasket right now, Dr. Mark Sperry, that's when we need him the most, right? That's when we need to put
Who
Cap
we
up
need
there.
is Nick Fury, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I'm sick and tired of these motherfucking Hydra agents on this motherfucking airship.
I think we should have Captain America now as that shining example once again, as contrast to.
Well,
perhaps
maybe
Trump
that's the new
administration.
anti-hero is Jack Armstrong or something. I mean, there's nothing left. If everybody's the devil, then what have you got left, you know? It's the opposite of the old problem where everybody was too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
This is how they're going to boost Iron Fist ratings. Danny Rand's going to come in and save America. Hide and watch them.
Well, let's hope that the post-Trump comic books come soon and strong.
But what a good tool for the resistance, right? Comic books.
They are.
Let's keep Cap, and let's have him on the cover punching Trump in the face.
Yeah, but do you think, well, I might offend some listeners, but do you think most comic readers even get that?
I would hope so.
Oh, yeah, but I don't
It's
know.
hardly even a subtext.
I mean, it's pretty much out there.
Captain America.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you look at, what is it, the new Captain, correct me if I'm wrong, Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel, what are the Palestinian girl?
Miss Marvel.
Yeah, her name's America. So, I mean, you know, there we go. That's a little bit of patriotism thrown in there.
Again, back to this guy. I wish I could think of his name, but he charged Wonder Woman as being a lesbian, and that's created this strong current through 40 years of cultural history. And Wonder Woman is a lesbian, and God bless her for it.
Be whatever the hell she wants to be.
Well, say, I mean, I'm just enjoying the show.
You mean the Seduction of Innocence book, right? That's your
Seduction of Innocence.
Right.
Oh,
I think
okay,
the guy's name is
Wertheim.
Wertheim. Yeah, that's it.
I mean, he was a really sick cat.
Well, I mean, he made the argument that Robin and Batman was a homosexual fantasy.
I saw him on the Merv Griffin show arguing with Vincent Price about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
But then again, I met Vincent Price in the grocery store once with Henry Faulkner and Tennessee Miller. So
Freaking amazing.
talk about seduction of the innocent. I was never the same after that.
say, was that a homosexual fantasy made manifest that day?
It certainly wasn't mine. I just have to live with it.
Well, who are your homosexual fantasies about then?
No,
Tom?
they're much different from that. They involve Norman Mailer and Barbara Steele.
Wow.
I mean, going back to the Wonder Woman thing, she lives on an island full of women, the Amazonians.
Wild Women of Wango.
Exactly. Why would she not be a lesbian? Like, I don't know. Hey, if I was a chick hanging on that island, I'd be a lesbian.
No, there's a great book about no kidding, that shows how much this stuff really means. I forget her name, but she's a cultural anthropologist at Harvard, and she wrote a cultural history of Wonder Woman over the years and what she's meant and how she's been attacked and how she inspired people. And so it's kind of the really cool, positive flip side to Frederick Wertheim.
Right.
That there are people that actually have scholarly powers who are able to track what this means through the culture.
Right.
And it's, not just calling Batman a homo. No, I think
Almost
it goes
sounds like
lot
a
further
degree of
than that.
McCarthyism as far as
It
like,
was.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
that's exactly what.
No,
This
he
sounds
was right
like.
at that time.
But
yeah.
the other comic book publishers pounced on that to basically destroy their rising rival, which was EC Comics.
Yes.
They used that, and they made their own rating system, kind of like how the motion picture industry did.
Yes. Comics Code.
The Comics Code Authority, that's right. And any comic that was sold would have this stamp of approval on it so that the parents could see that the kids weren't reading bad stuff
But EC Comics then turned into Mad Magazine.
That's correct. William Gaines.
Which turned into everything about subversive comedy ever sint.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like the government thinking they could use LSD to make people more patriotic.
Exactly.
Party on, Garth.
Do you remember I think it was like a year ago where they dropped Wonder Woman? They had this campaign set up where Linda Carter and Gal Gadot both were like something about International Women's Day. They had some event planned in Washington and everything, but they booted it. They sacked Wonder Woman because her tits were too big.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Why you do this?
Linda Carter went batshit crazy about it and just tore everybody a new one. But
Yeah.
it's like, it's not about her tits. About empowering women of all cup sizes.
Tell it to George Clooney in that Batman movie with those nipple rings.
Oh my God.
Bat nipples.
The worst.
If you're going to eradicate nipples from comics, let's start with that.
Joel Schumacher, the worst.
So anyway.
I'm sorry, I'm from Shelbyville, so I steered us into a lot of homophobia that we should try to transcend.
It's all good.
Well, rush out to the post office and get the new Wonder Woman stamps.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I lick them?
You can.
That's a fantasy come true.
Way to dig deeper, boys. If any of our intrepid listeners would like to chime in on this topic or anything else you've heard us cover on Geeks Boutique, you can drop us an email at geeksboutiquelex@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter at geeksboutique1, or even message us on Instagram with geeks_boutique_Lexington. You can also find our Facebook page at Geeks Boutique Lex. We'd love to hear from you, and one lucky listener will have their comment read out on next month's show.
Follow us now, brave fanboys and fangirls, as we lead you into a realm of terror and gore. It's time for us all to face our fears and step into the mausoleum.
In the mausoleum this month, we brought in a very special guest, Dr. Tom Marksberry of the University of Kentucky. Dr. Marksberry teaches a very popular series of courses on documentary film, filmmaking, film noir, new TV, and the rhetoric of horror.
And the history of hip.
And the history of hip. Wow, look at there. I forgot one. Right? Apparently, I'm not hip. So, Dr. Marksberry, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about your research, your classes, and in particular, we'd like to know what brought you to develop this rhetoric of horror class and offer that to the students.
Well, maybe I ought to cut to the chase because the history of how I got there is a documentary in itself that someone should produce. But I came out of an academic background where I studied American literature, and then the really avant-garde move on that was to study film, which nobody much was doing at that point. Mm-hmm. And then I taught an awful lot of creative writing and American literature, but thank God I didn't have to teach, American Lit surveys to the end of my career. And when my program broke off with English, and I was sort of the red-headed stepchild in the middle of it, and Sophie's Choice candidate. But that allowed me to develop basically a suite of courses all my own, that most of whom you've listed. Mm-hmm. But the rhetoric of horror in particular was based on when I was probably 10 years old, my Sunday school teacher pulled over my parents and said, "Man, this guy's way too into these horror movies. We got to stop him."
I don't know why, but for some reason, Sunday school and you just don't seem synonymous.
No, I was there.
We all had a phase.
And thank God my parents said, no, he loves this stuff. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it was like these little 8mm, like I had the ending of Horror of Dracula, Terrence Fisher, Christopher Lee. Nice. I would show the stuff in my mother's laundry room or something. And they, God bless them, they encouraged me to do this and kind of overrode my Sunday school teacher and therefore God. I mean, that's the beginning of it. Cut forward 40 years, and I get a chance to teach a 400 level UK course in the rhetoric of horror, which I had always been interested in. And to me, there's two ways this goes wrong. One of which is, oh, it's just horror, it's entertainment. What scares you? That didn't scare me. I don't care about that shit at all. But the other side is, oh, I'm an academic. Horror is an art form. It's all got to mean a lot. And if it doesn't, it doesn't, you know. I mean, there's like two completely different, contrary versions of it. And what I wanted to do was justify horror as both a popular culture piece of entertainment and as art. And I think it qualifies as both, but you can go to an extreme in the direction either way.
Would you say
at this point I'll wait for another question from you?
Would you say the best horror lies somewhere in between those 2 points?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
And one of the movies I'm here to promote is Get Out.
Mm-hmm.
And Get Out works on every level. So it's not overtly pretentious and artistic, which is a misdirection in one way, but it's really smart. Mm-hmm. And what's so subversive and I think powerful about it is that it reaches a general audience and makes them think more about their socio-political reality in a really dramatic and vivid way. And that's what you want out of art and popular culture.
Mm-hmm. I saw it, I think 2 weeks ago in the cinema, and it did a good job of putting you in the position of the main character. I'm not a young, good-looking black man, but I could empathize very easily with that character in the film. And
as a white person, it made me afraid of white people.
Exactly.
It's not the first time that's ever happened, but it was. I think that's a good thing for white people to feel. Is like, man, I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, and it's good to show them that standpoint so that they can actually feel it, because maybe it's hard to understand unless you're in the situation, and it kind of puts you in the situation.
And I think horror can be an incredibly effective political medium because it's not preachy. It doesn't have to point its finger at you or anything. It's just like, look what this feels like when you're in this position. Mm-hmm. Because of the subjectivity of it, it manages to make an objective statement.
Mm-hmm. I've actually taken your rhetoric of horror class. I think maybe
sorry
the first
about
time
that.
you offered it back in 2015.
That's unfortunate.
No, it was awesome, and I like how you'd come into class and just start talking. No notes or anything, and it's just we're just going to have this conversation for an hour 3 times a week, and I was just loving it. But I don't know if I got it from your class or something else, but maybe you or one of the students said something about how Christian horror really is. So maybe being in your Sunday school class wasn't that far of a leap, because
no, exactly. I think
horror actually kind of reinforces a lot of Christian ethics.
Absolutely. There's no, I mean, that's the reply to my Sunday school teacher, that horror really makes you think about good and evil in a more profound way, with more nuances of moral ambiguity. But, and the very premises of horror depend on basic fears of what's going to happen after you die, and is anybody really in charge of your life? And so, that was the irony about the Sunday school teacher, is I was, I mean, I don't know what I am, but to the extent that I'm not an atheist, it's probably because of horror movies, which have made me,
right.
You know,
and maybe,
I don't know if I believe in God, but I know I believe in the devil. And that's a start.
Yeah. I remember, to me, there's an old animated Christian television show that Dr. Marksberry may be the only other person here might remember it, but it was called Jot. I don't know if you remember that. It was like a little circle figure, and basically he would commit all these sins, and then his parents, he would like, it was like the ultimate guilt trip, and it was almost horrific as a child to watch it. And I have really bad memories of watching that show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Davy and Goliath, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shit's a whole lot scarier than Roman Polanski.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think I read too somewhere, it's interesting, you're talking about religion in horror. But I think I read sometime, and of course I'm not an expert on this, but I know that OCD develops in young male adults, I think, when they're in their teenage years. Like most people who develop OCD, like from 17, 18 years old, that they really get hung up. If they come from a religious background, they really get hung up on obsessions with the devil, and committing sin and that kind of thing. So, nevertheless, yeah, there's Jot.
That's
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is, so take your word for it.
I mean, to take this into another place, horror is like westerns and noir, which are my other two favorite genres, both of which are available as word courses in the years coming if you're looking.
Word is the Writing, Rhetoric, and Digital Studies Department at the University of Kentucky that Tom recently achieved tenure status in.
Yes.
So if you're around and interested in the class, shoot us an email. I can hook you up.
But they all seem like they're the snobby way to look at genre is that it's so moralistic and one-dimensional, and westerns are the worst. Like the guy in the black hat and the guy in the white hat. God, imagine there's a girl in any kind of hat. Mm-hmm. And yet they're all so subtle, the best of them, because they seem to be so one-dimensionally moralistic, but they're actually so interested in moral ambiguity and ideological hysteria. And so, I mean, how many movies are there about, like Vincent Price punishing witches that are actually from the point of view of the witches? And I'm citing Witchfinder General by Michael Reeves, which is, I think, one of the greatest movies of all time that hardly anybody knows about. So, lot of great, really complex investigations of patriarchy, hegemony, all the fashionable kimonos that we want to blow up. Go to horror. That's where it happens.
So how have you found the class? You were talking about students in their early 20s at best, maybe younger than that. It's offered in the English department, the writing department, and also honors college at UK. So have you found the students receptive to these themes and the things that you're talking about?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Some of them fight me at first, and I encourage students to fight me because I think that makes for a better class. And again, there's two directions you can go. You can turn the worst movie ever into something profound, or you can turn the best movie ever into, it's like, I want to make you think. I want to make you think and look at this closely and take it seriously. And they've gratified me, no doubt. But a lot of them are surprised, I think, at how much more there is going on than they saw on the surface.
Right. I was going to say that.
If we're running out of time,
no, you're fine.
Say this: the main problem you run into with is that doesn't scare me, and so it turns into this sort of macho. Or versus that, I don't want to look at that. That's gross. Mm-hmm. And there's different levels to it. And Stephen King famously said, I want them to feel dread, but if I can, I'll go for the gross out. And there's a big distance between those. Mm-hmm. And so again, without being too pretentious about turning horror into art, dread, I think, is close to a religious level, which resembles transcendence. Which it's beyond anxiety, and it's certainly beyond the gross out, which you can shake off the minute you get out of the theater. But real dread is when you wake up the next day asking existential questions about your whole environment, and that's something that horror can do better than any other art form.
Is there anything that you found that kind of across the board unanimously inspires dread and horror in the general populace?
Yeah, reality.
That's why we have comics. Yeah. That's why we have video games and movies attached from that.
Yeah, that's what Dr. Marcus Berry, we were talking earlier about movies that wouldn't necessarily be classically placed in the genre of
Jumped all
horror.
over my next question.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of like Straw Dogs, by Sam Peckinpah.
Yeah.
I think that's a movie that fills me with dread, complete dread.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to my mind, I'm not interested in being really rigorous about, has that got monsters in it or not? I think that's a really stupid way to look at it.
Right.
And yes, Straw Dogs it's a hybrid of various other things and a horror movie. And in the current political climate, I would point out the Manchurian Candidate, which is a political thriller, but it scares the shit out of me, and now more than ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the questions we always wrestled with in the class with what is horror, and
I'm always pushing for a more general sense of that. And when you think about dread, I mean, it could, why isn't Twin Peaks horror? There are certain Westerns, why aren't they horror?
Right.
you had us
The current political climate is horror.
Yeah, you had us watch Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia and ask the question, well, is this horror? I would say so. I mean, the most horrific things you can imagine are done by our fellow humans, and that's a very grim movie.
The human monster.
Right.
I mean, the only reason we've invented monsters is just to exemplify our human feelings. And the most that you can accomplish in a horror film, and again, I would point to Get Out as a recent example of this, is to establish not some kind of gross out emotional moment, but establish an accumulating sensation of vague and then more and more specific anxiety that leads you to what you might personally fear. And I would point to a Black Mirror, which I think is another high point of modern horror. You can argue if it's science fiction or not. But there's an episode where this sort of Jeff Bridges freewheeling kind of guy takes this experiment where it's like, let's make you see what you're most afraid of. And without getting too deep in the weeds, it starts out, it's like spiders and real generic stuff that, nobody's afraid of anymore. I mean, that's part of the problem. It's like after the Kennedy assassination, what is horror? That's more horror. Boris Karloff isn't that scary after we blown Kennedy's skull off.
Sure.
You ever wonder if he said, I need another, parade, like I need a hole in the head?
But the spiders that he's afraid of start turning into the bully that battered him around in the 6th grade. And without giving the whole episode away, it's like, what are you really afraid of? You're not afraid of Bela Lugosi.
Right.
And you're afraid of something things that happen to you and things that might happen to you in a very specific and non-arbitrary way. And that becomes this like inoculation of how we can get beyond that. I mean, I'm afraid of you, Jason.
Me? I'm a pussycat.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
He's afraid of cats. Like, I think that's what we're deducing from this.
Okay, we'll talk about that off air, but let's go ahead. I like where this is heading. Let's go ahead and transition into Hillbillies on Film, and let's pick up a few horror movies that we think that have been recent releases that have really taken up these themes that we're talking about, and kind of, I would say, evolved the genre a little bit out of just splatter porn or torture porn or all of the just dumb scare stuff into some really...
I hate modern horror movies for that exact reason.
Well,
that torture porn.
Well,
like,
these you might like. We'll talk about those in a minute in Hillbillies on Film.
All right, ghouls and goblins, the morning sun has vanquished the horrible night. It's time to change your shorts and steady your nerves for Hillbillies on Film.
Settle in and uncork your favorite homemade wine. In Hillbillies on Film, we give our backcountry thoughts on film and long-form television. Highfalutin Hollywood types we ain't, but we might have a thought or two worth your while. consider spelling listen now, you hear? Hillbillies on field!
Somebody get that heifer.
All right. While we've got Dr. Marksberry here, I wanted to keep milking him for all he's worth and talk about some of the horror titles specifically, especially some of the new ones that he thinks have done a good job of evolving the genre. And, you know, they're not just based on jump scares and spooky things, that they really have something to say about modern society, or they use horror as a vehicle to portray other things. Some of the ones I had in mind personally that are favorites would include The Babadook, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is an Iranian film, It Follows, and Get Out. So, well, Dr. Marksberry, do you think that the new directors are getting a better grasp on the things that they can do with horror and the statements they can make using horror as a genre?
Yeah, I think we're rounding the corner from kind of a bleak period to a better period. Although it's interesting that historically, one thing I do with the classes, it's not a history class, so we don't chronologically march through titles.
Right.
But I do try to include films from all periods of film. The first horror film ever was made by Edison. He did a 2-minute version of Frankenstein in 1900.
Wow.
And there are a number of really great silent films from horror. And then that, it kind of dips in and out. The 30s are a good period. The 40s are a little bit funkier. The 50s turn into mostly science fiction, atomic bomb scare stuff. The 60s are a little shakies. The 70s is the great period. Well, I'll drop it there. But it horror never goes away, and it's a really good way to map the zeitgeist in terms of what people are afraid about at a certain time. And so you can look at every one of those decades I just talked about, and the films reflect what the specific anxieties are. And I think that trickles forward. Mm-hmm. And my fear, I'm an old guy, I'm 60 years old. And plus I went to see every movie until my kids got to a certain point, and then I started going to Pokemon for what seemed like 20 years.
It's horrifying in its own right.
But when I made my way back into it, I was so bummed out by all the torture porn and the remakes.
Yeah.
But even going back to that, some of the torture porn is better than I thought it would be, and some of the remakes, in isolated cases, were better. But all those movies that you just mentioned give me tremendous hope for the future. And every one of them, I think, represents a doorway into something that's more original, less generic, more socially conscious, leads to a way out. And for instance, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Dark is like an Iranian vampire spaghetti western, feminist set in, Southern California. There's no way to describe it. It's
shot in black and white.
It's sui generis, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful film.
I love that. It's one of my faves.
And if you watch the commentary on it, there's a big interview she's got with Roger Corman, who was the major... the only interesting thing going on in the 60s in American horror films, doing all those Vincent Price drive-in teenage sex movies.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that he connected with it that way.
Do you remember his movie Frankenstein Unbound? Corman?
Too late in the game. Yeah, I saw it.
Gotcha.
I got nothing there.
One thing I liked about A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is, again, it is kind of a feminist movie. The spoiler alert, the vampire is a young girl, and she chooses to prey on misogynistic bastards. And you end up being like, yeah, girl, you totally need to rip that guy's throat out. And again, it kind of puts you like Get Out does. It puts you into the kind of frame of mind, or being at least able to heavily empathize with that character, and where you're kind of rooting for the vampire. And there's a really cool relationship going on with the man that she ends up with at the end, and he makes some odd choices, but
and horror movies have always been about the other, and the cool thing about really sort of postmodern movies is that the other is the hero, you know. And God bless them for that. I mean, the Babadook, I think all those things work that way. They're feminist tracks. They're other. They're not about white boy geeks like all of us sitting around. You know.
Yeah.
It's finally changed.
Can you talk more about the Babadook? Because I was a huge fan of that one as well. And if anybody came to my horror mini marathon at my house last Halloween, we watched it.
Well, it's the plight of the single mother to the 10th power.
Yeah.
And neither the mother nor the child are that immediately attractive.
No.
And so movies are all about like finding somebody to link into and empathize with. And the Babadook plays with that because you kind of go back and forth between her and the child. And you develop a lot of empathy for both of them. And then you understand that it's all a criticism of the patriarchy by the end of it.
I like how the movie kind of wraps up on an odd note, but it kind of symbolizes the family coming to grips with the trauma that they've endured, which is kind of personified by the horror. The monster is kind of the specter of the tragedy that struck their life.
Yes.
And their lives are never going to be normal again. But
No, you
they're
have
learning to cope with it.
You can live with the monster, but you have to feed it worms every day. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're all doing that to one degree or
Yeah.
another. We're all feeding those worms to that thing in the basement.
I think horror, more than other art forms, is about closed versus open endings. And so all horror movies originally had closed endings.
Right.
All the classical ones. And so it invented problems for them. They never thought they were going to have to do a sequel. So it's like, oh, Frankenstein's just on this slab and he wakes up and who knew, you know.
Yeah.
But then the cliche became open endings where there was no sense of how it was resolved. And I loved those in the 70s and 80s. But I think what's more interesting about something like the Babadook is it is open and closed.
Yeah.
So we have killed the Babadook, but on the other hand, we still have to dwell with it. And to me, that's more like life as far as I understand it.
Right. I would make the same point about It Follows. Again, kind of a punishing story. It's making statements about promiscuity, especially with younger individuals. And the end scene is the girl who has the curse has chosen this boyfriend. He knows what he's getting into, and they're walking down the street hand in hand, and they're being followed by the thing. And so they've brought that into a relationship, and they know it, and they're dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's not open or closed. It's ongoing. It'll haunt them the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The only thing that I didn't like about that was that it was like, oh, let's just get a hooker and we'll lay it on her.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought it sort of copped out on all its politics right there.
Yeah, and there's the one scene where she swims out to the guys on the boat, you know, and it's like she's going to saddle these three guys with the horror, and they have no idea what they're getting into. So they're probably dead.
I'm not familiar with the movie. What's the general premise of she's
basically
handing out a supernatural STD or?
Yes.
Wow, total shot in the dark.
Essentially, there's a girl, she has her boyfriend, they finally get it on, and I think it's ether or something. He knocks her out with some ether. She wakes up, she's strapped to this chair, and he's like, I got to tell you something. I've given this to you. You're going to see people following you. If they touch you, it will kill you. You have to escape it. It will never stop following you. It's slow, but it's always following you. It's like your past never stops.
It's just funny how these things, it's like, oh, here's a progressive idea, but I've got a really reactionary subtext to it all.
Yeah.
It's like slasher films. Horror films can be a really have a moral is one thing, but to be conservative and moralistic and reactionary, and then something like It Follows pretends to be more proactive, but
not so much. Like I said, the maybe the one bright spot is the end where the young couple kind of comes together and they shoulder that burden together. maybe.
Yeah,
that's
but you
something.
can't get rid of it. It's
No.
like chlamydia. It's not AIDS. It's chlamydia. It's just chlamydia.
So can you get rid of it by passing it to someone else?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
If you pass it to someone else, the thing will follow them until it kills them. But then it starts going down the line.
Oh, it'll come back to you.
It'll come back to you if it kills everybody ahead of you.
So you basically just have to fuck like your life depends on it, basically.
Ultimately, yeah.
I'm okay with this.
Or just hook it on to somebody else. That's
Yeah, and hoping they stay alive long enough.
Here, let me take care of you after I've saddled you with the supernatural STD.
It's a good. It's good. One thing I like too about we talked a lot in the class about the the hallmarks of the horror genre, the things they use. I like how these newer movies still keep with those things, like teenage sex, The Last Girl, all those kind of themes that go throughout horror. They're still keeping that, so they're still staying true to the genre in some sense, but they've got more of these modern takes on things, and they've evolved the genre while staying kind of honor bound to it.
Yeah, that's the issue. I was on a master's exam, and the girl was talking about postmodern slasher films and had they become more feminist or not.
Mm-hmm.
And she did a great job, but it's like, well, if and it's about revisionist anything. If you turn it upside down, are you still honoring the initial tradition, or are you doing something different with it? And I'm more interested in something like A Girl Walks Home After Dark Alone, that I think completely, in a real punk rock political style, subverts all the sexism about those movies. Whereas something like It Follows kind of pretends to do that up to a point and then cops out completely.
Right.
And buys into the same old bullshit. And I think it's important to make the distinction between those two movements.
So, in your expert opinion, what are some of the best horror films of all time?
This is what I've been waiting on.
That's a big question.
Hey, and this is what I've been waiting on.
I know it's a big question, but give our readers some suggestions if they want to go out, experience good horror, because it's hard to find. You've said so yourself.
20s, The Unknown by Todd Browning. 30s, Bride of Frankenstein by James Whale.
Yeah.
40s, The Cat People by Val Lewton. 50s were a bad time. Horror of Dracula by Terence Fisher and the Hammer films in particular. 60s, Night of the Living Dead. 70s, everything that was made in the 70s.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah. 80s.
Suspiria.
I really like Suspiria. Yeah, yeah. We can ramble on forever. 80s, I really like the Stuart Gordon Lovecraft adaptations, Reanimator and From Beyond. 90s, Candyman, which I think is the most remarkable racial parable ever in American film under the guise of a horror film.
Nice.
After that, I don't know. I'm an old man. I'm out of touch.
I've got to add one, just one of my favorites, because I'm just such a geek. I'm a big Trekkie. Right?
Yeah.
But I love the movie that William Shatner made. I think it was in the 60s, called The Incubus, where it's all in Esperanto.
Yeah, that's based on a really good novel, too.
Oh, is it?
That's a great horror writer, the guy that wrote Incubus, Ray Russell.
Yeah. If you ever wanted to hear William Shatner deliver his stilted delivery in Esperanto, then that's the movie you got to find.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot that one.
Yeah, somebody set me down and made me watch that a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Actually, the novel's really good.
Martyrs? Okay. Mike, the director, Hardin, just showed me something called The Martyrs. When was that out? 2008. Not familiar with that one.
Oh yeah, I'm not about to debate you young boys about
What about the classics? The Shining, Exorcist.
Great.
I
love classics.
Yeah. Okay. Let's
What
wrap
I
it up.
would really love, what would have been a better question if you'd been better prepared.
Oh.
would have been, what are the movies nobody noticed from each decade?
Okay, then how about the movies that went under the radar from each decade that should be horror?
I don't know.
Horror
Now that I've insulted you.
You can't insult me. That's the thing.
His self-worth.
Besides, you've got tenure. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
No wonder you're filled with horror by him.
So do you have a few, really?
Yeah. Alternative, Island of Lost Souls and Mad Love from the 30s. Yeah. I'm not that well prepared and too drunk.
That's how we like to do it here on the Geeks Boutique Podcast.
But that's what you ought to look to is not the canonical stuff, but the stuff that got overlooked. And like Island of Lost Souls and Mad Love are two really good examples from the 30s of films that don't get, nobody talks about them. And they're better than almost anything that got released except for Bride of Frankenstein, which everybody knows.
Yeah. As a side note, they're actually shooting a horror film here in Lexington right now. If you head out Winchester Road, Route 60 towards Winchester, the director
they're shooting a horror film in America right now.
Well, this is a local boy, Brian Sexton.
I begin to think you might not be a fan of Trump, Dr. Marksberry. Just call it a hunch.
I'm picking up on a theme, right? Well, this is a local guy, Brian Sexton. The film is called The Wiccan. I think he did some work on Hellboy and a few other films. So I've been tempted to drive down Route 60 at night and see what they're doing over there.
God bless them.
Yeah. So it's good to see local stuff. Okay, let's let Dr. Marksberry off the hook, so to speak, and head into our next segment. We'll join Zach in a few minutes. He's going to tell us all about the Steampunk Symposium that he went to up in Cincinnati, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thanks, Dr. Marksberry.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes,
that was great.
It was a pleasure having you.
So, Zach, you're fresh from the International Steampunk Symposium that was held up in Cincinnati, Ohio. What do you got to say for yourself? Give us a report.
I had a really great time up there. This is the second year that I've gone to the Steampunk Symposium. It's heralded as the International Steampunk Symposium, sponsored by Aloysius Fox. If there was ever a more steampunk name, I'm not sure there is one.
Aloysius.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It was at the...
Is that his real name?
I'm gonna say yeah, sure. Why not? Like it was a good time.
It is now.
At being the drunken wanderer that I typically am, I pretty much stayed intoxicated for 3 days and just enjoyed the amazing artwork and booths and vendors and everything that was up there. One of the things that really caught my eye, and I think I've actually got this on the page, was there was a group that had done a steampunk Star Wars mashup.
Yes, I saw that.
And there were two girls that were dressed up as steampunk Twi'leks, and that was that was pretty awesome to see because they had taken these headbands and made taken fabric and then painted latex over top of it. And I had to ask, I was like, "Excuse me, miss, do you mind if I fondle your tentacles? Because I'm a gentleman and I would ask first." And they were every bit as gross and realistic feeling as you would ever expect some steampunk Twi'lek tentacles to ever be.
What are those things officially called in Star Wars lore? Are they head tentacles of the Twi'leks? Lecky?
Lecky? Okay.
Can I touch your Lecky?
She kind of knew what I was wanting, the tentacles. I mean, hey, you don't just walk up and grab a girl by the tentacles. This is, I know it's a Trump world that we're living in, but that's not okay. No, it's not. But there was all kinds of great stuff up there. People dressed up in just fantastic costumes. Aloysius, who does the show, or Colin, did kind of a different take with the vendors that was met with mixed reviews, but it was still kind of a neat concept. Around the inside of the hotel, they have all these suites set up for people that are normally rooms. He actually had all the vendors set up in those suites as if they were storefronts. So you walked around from store to store to store. And it was kind of an interesting thing overall. But there was one guy, I can't remember his actual name, but he came out in this, it was like a steampunk scarecrow kind of abomination mashup thing, and that was really interesting. But you saw a lot of, the typical people with lots of gears and brass and leather, because steampunk is basically what happened when the goth kids discovered the color brown. and that's where we're at this point. Some of my really good friends with the booth Artifixer, they were up there. They do a lot of leather corsets and just different costumes. I think they do great work, and that's Keith Kay. He does all that work. But just all the things you could really want from a steampunk symposium. I did my steampunk pirate outfit, and that was an absolute fucking headache putting together at the very last minute, because for the guns, they weren't dry in time. So I literally driving up the road to this thing, gassing myself out with this, sealant fumes blowing into the car. Had to roll the windows down so I could dry the fucking guns on the way up there, and had to take a sewing machine up there to finish up the costume, because if there's nothing else that I'm good at, it's last minute shit.
But that seems to be a theme, though, with cosplayers, isn't it? Like last minute stress, getting their stuff together. I mean,
it's cosplay is consistently the greatest experience that I never want to do again, and I can consistently do it. I fucking love it. It's like, I think this is pretty much what people who do heroin kind of feel like, oh, I'm never going to do this again, but this is a lot of fun. But no, the whole symposium is great. The best part, though, of symposium, I would have to say, is always the after party. They have this thing called the Hall of Debauchery, and the rules basically are anything goes. And people have room parties.
So you can touch the leckies if you attend the Hall of Debauchery.
I think it's pretty much just decorum to touch the leckies. Like you're pretty much supposed to at this
Just
point.
don't damage them.
Don't damage the leckies. I'm trying to think of anything else really jumped out. There's all kinds of fantastic art. It's like every con, you really people come out of the woodwork for this stuff, and you see things that you would never see on the day-to-day with this kind of stuff. A lot of great jewelry, a lot of great just general artisanry work goes into this stuff, and it's amazing how much time and effort people put into these things. No, as always though, Symposium was a great time.
Picks up on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I've got the girl with her leckies out on the page. I think I've got my steampunk pirate outfit up there. And it's like I said, it's kind of weird of like, to a degree, how open people are. Like, people will just come up and like start kind of like touching on your costume. I'm like, whoa, I appreciate that, but like, there needs you're in my bubble. So like I said, I didn't run and grab old girls' leckies or anything. But made some pretty really good connections up there. There's the I want to say it's like Middle America Steampunk Group. It's something to the acronym is MAPS. And one of the girls that was up there, she's supposedly like the head of this group. They're based out of Louisville, and she wanted me to come out there and teach some classes on weapon making and everything for her group.
That's great. There you go.
So, once again, just kind of drumming up business. I was like, hey, you should totally listen to this podcast that we do out of Lexington. And she's like, yeah, I'll give it a listen. Would love to be on there. So hopefully we can get her out here sometime.
And if anybody out there is listening and has an interest in the stuff that Zach puts together, what's your Etsy page?
It's
drop that info on them.
Brocker's Armory. We specialize in really a lot of steampunk stuff, just because that's kind of been my big interest. But do a lot of fantasy, some sci-fi stuff, and we also do custom commissions. So really, if there's anything somebody wants made or is interested in, we can kind of whip it up with the shop there pretty quickly.
Brockers, BRO
KKRS.
KKRS.
It's actually for anybody that's into kind of the Norse mythology stuff. Brocker is the dwarf that forged Thor's hammer.
Mjolnir?
So, yeah,
wow.
It was made by the dwarves. So that's kind of going
back to
the
one that was bitten by Loki the fly, or was that its brother?
Oh God, you're making my feelings.
Oh, who's unprepared now?
I know, right? Like I'm trying to think. I think this was also the same one though that had the deal with Loki, to where if he could craft better
that's him.
material with him than Loki, he got his head.
Yeah, yeah. He was working the bellows, and he was. Remember, he worked the bellows, and then there would be these. They made like 3 different magical items.
I think that was the one. The brother that was working the bellows is the one that got bit by the fly.
Right, and that's why the hammer has a short handle. It had one.
Look at you.
It had one flaw.
I thought Thor just liked to choke up.
I've got a nerd boner right now that you could carry me out of this place with. This is amazing.
So anyway, if you're interested in some of Zach's stuff, check out Brocker's Armory. Yeah. And I've seen it myself. He does some pretty good work. He's going to be at some cons pretty soon with his wares on display. You're going to Louisville Derby City Con
this year?
I'll
be. That'll be actually my first outing as a vendor.
Debut outing.
So we'll have Brocker's Armory, and then also in the same booth we'll have Geeks Boutique up there. Hopefully we can have some merchandise made. I definitely want to split the booth and have all that out there.
Hell yeah.
Cool.
Also, definitely encourage anybody to check out the International Steampunk Symposium. That's the steampunk convention in Ohio. It's typically, I want to say, about the end of April is when they do the last weekend in April. But also monthly, the same group that puts that on does a steampunk salon in Cincinnati, and they encourage everybody to go out there. It's brought on by the Pandora Society, and I want to say they do Pandora Con, and they do the Steampunk Symposium, and that's their big events. But great people. I mean, you really couldn't meet a better group of people just to hang out with, and they're super welcoming. And you see like all levels of skill, people that are just getting into steampunk stuff and people that have been doing this for years. Overall, I mean, it's kind of a a little bit older crowd that hangs out out there at Symposium. So I think it's a really good time. And like I said, the Hall of Debauchery, the best part of it is the alcohol's free. It's good decorum to tip, and once the tip jar fills up the first time, it is shirtless o'clock. And then the tip jar fills up the second time. It is now pantsless o'clock. And all the ladies have their leckies out at that point.
Wow.
So hopefully, maybe we get going with this. We'll have to do...
and the gentlemen?
They have their lecky out. I think gentlemen only have the one. The females have the two.
I'm not up on my Twi'lek
Anatomy.
biology or anatomy. So
not my thing. But hopefully we can go up there and maybe talk to them about getting some media stuff and actually do some live coverage in the coming years.
All right, cool. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you, guys.
My lord, there is an urgent communication from Admiral Hardin at Imperial Security Command. He is awaiting your instruction.
Captain, tell the Admiral that I want a full report on the segment ship from Fantasy Flight's X-Wing game. I require an in-depth history and strategic analysis of the featured vessel.
As you wish, my lord.
Lieutenant, you heard the orders. Relay the message to the Admiral at once.
Okay, welcome back, listeners. We're about to debut a new segment on our podcast. We're all big fans of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars X-Wing miniatures game. Been playing for a couple years now. So we thought we'd have a gaming segment here. Mike Hardin is our resident X-Wing pro, and Scott Don't Fuck Around Dills is our Star Wars guy. He knows more than anybody I know about the lore of Star Wars. So they're going to team up to bring you this new segment. A little bit of history, a little bit of tactics. Take it away, Mike and Scott.
I guess I'm going to go first since I got a little bit of the history fluff that I'm going to contribute to the cast today. So I did a little research on the TIE Defender, and I'm not particularly a big fan of the Defender. I think it's kind of a goofy looking ship. That's just my opinion.
That's just like your opinion, man.
It's just my opinion, man. But when Mike plays him, he totally crushes the fuck out of everybody, and so I'm kind of done with the Defenders. But anyway, as far as the actual in the universe fluff of the Defender, it was created by Grand Admiral Thrawn, who is a character that
Blue guy, right?
He's the blue guy. He's a Chiss.
Right.
And he's actually created by Timothy Zahn. I believe it's Heir to the Empire is the first book that he came about in. And so the way the story goes, in 2 years before the Battle of Yavin, Thrawn decided that he needed a fighter that could kind of be a good match for some of the more potent ships in the rebellion. And so he created a ship that could actually run independently from the larger ships like the Star Destroyers and whatnot. So it actually has its own hyperdrive, and a really rare feature for a TIE fighter is it actually has deflector shields. So not only can it jump from place to place, it also, the pilot has the option to use shields. And the way the story goes is the Defender is, it's an advanced pilot ship. So if you were a pilot in the Empire, you had to fly at least 20 missions in the TIE Interceptor without dying, which does not have shields and does not have hyperdrive. If you made it through 20 missions in the TIE Interceptor, then you were eligible to become a TIE Defender pilot, which was like the best of the best of the best. The TIE Defender, it stuck around till about 44 after the Battle of Yavin. So it became, pretty much a mainstay in the Imperial sort of fleets and whatnot. So it's a pretty potent ship. I really hate to play it in X-Wing miniatures because especially when Mike plays it, he puts these lists together that they're just pretty much unbeatable. So I'm going to hand it over to Mike here and see what he has to say about the actual in-game strategy and what he thinks about the Defender.
Well, first of all, in my defense, the list...
In your tie defense?
Your tie defense. The lists I put together are actually really simple. You know, the ships themselves may only have maybe one upgrade card, and I think it's just the intrinsic flying ability of the ship itself that makes them so dangerous on the mat. In that, I mean, specifically for those of us that play X-Wing Minis out there, you understand that there are certain maneuvers that induce stress on pilots that make you less able to effectively combat your opponent. The Defender has that unique ability to turn completely around and do what they call a choreogram turn or K-turn without stressing the pilot. And for me, when years ago when I started playing, a couple of years ago when I started playing, that was really attractive to me, to be able to turn on your opponent and still be able to have an action economy against them. And so that's when I bought them and started flying them, and really fell in love with them, and kind of had everybody else fall out of love with them. But they've been really fun for me to fly, as far as they're kind of like a dragster to me.
Okay, so you're talking about how elegant the gameplay supposedly is, and I think that maybe is true, and really Mike is Grand Admiral Hardin, because the way he plays the damn things, like they're just unstoppable. So like, I think the pilot has a lot to do with how the ships are flown too. So
give yourself some credit, is what you're saying.
Yeah, basically.
Well, they
it's a good ship when flown well is really tough to beat.
They don't have a turret. I mean, they can't fire out their rear end. They can't fire out their sides. You have to fly the ships. You have to have good spatial awareness on the board. You have to understand that, it's kind of like being a point guard on a basketball team. You can't live in the play that you're in at the moment. You have to think one and even two plays ahead as to what's going to happen there, as to where the ball's going to go on the court. And if you can begin to grasp where that's going to happen and where your opponent's ships may be, statistically analyze where they may or may not be in those moves ahead, I think that really helps you. And, I got to admit, I guess right a lot. There is a lot of luck involved in this, and I guess right sometimes.
Yeah, but those are educated guesses too, though, because when you fly, and maybe the listeners would be interested in hearing this, is you use probabilities. Like you look at it and you mathematically determine. You think, well, the probability of them actually going in this direction is so much of a percentage. And I'm sure a lot of gamers, hardcore gamers, they use that kind of probability. But that's one of your strategies that you use.
I'm kind of the anti baseball card nerd, as you would call it. I'm not the type of player that wants to research the ship and the best combination possible of cards you can put on that makes you unbeatable, so that you can just kind of fly around anywhere and shoot anywhere you want to, and you're still going to hold your own against everybody. For me, I want to be that pilot that puts you in arc and does maneuvers to make that happen. Much like when we all first started playing the game, and the first and second waves that came out, there weren't really a lot of ships that didn't do that, and that's just how I learned to play. And I'm going to keep playing that. I'm a purist. I don't want to do turrets. Although I did get a decimator for my birthday, and I'm playing that next time.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just like Zack Gregory, who is also our other really awesome X-Wing pilot.
Jerk.
Oh, stop it, you.
They Mike and Zach are really contenders. I mean, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to butt you out of the game here, Jason.
You suck.
No. Jason's really good.
I own it.
Jason got us into the game, so we have him to blame for our
fucking crack dealer.
Plastic crack addiction. But basically, Mike goes toe to toe with Zach. It's always like, you never know. You never know who's gonna.
Zach is a good flyer. I want to give him credit, front end for that. He's a very good strategist and all that, but he puts together these goddamn lists that drive you nuts.
I am the baseball card gamer, so that leads me to my next question.
He puts these maddening things together.
So I wanted to ask Mike, what's your typical loadout for a TIE D? Like, what pilots do you fly? What stuff do you upgrade them with?
Well, I've learned to have the fun configuration, and then there's the tournament configuration. The fun configuration, I fly whether the heck I want to. Whatever we feel like.
If you're ticked off at Zach and you want him dead on turn 2.
I'm going to fly 3 named Defender pilots with no upgrade cards. I'm going to use their innate pilot abilities and use those advantages. That way I don't have to keep track of anything in the game. I can focus on where does the ship go, where's that ship going to go, and how do I kill it.
If you want to be a TIE Defender ace, I guess you would recommend going out and picking out Imperial Vets, right? That's the expansion.
I would get the Vets kit.
Nice stuff.
Yeah, I would
cool
definitely.
Red paint job.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any particular upgrades though that you highly recommend? I know you said you like the named pilots, but is there anything as far as your loadout goes that's like a must-have upgrade?
Well, the unique cards for the Defender groups are the things that you really have to upgrade. You have the choice between the TIE X7 upgrade, it takes 2 points off, but you lose a lot of your secondary weapon slots. But it also gives you a free evade token for flying fast.
Yeah, fuck
the
that
other
thing.
one. The other one's TIE D that gives you the ability to fire twice, once with the secondary, once with your primary. For guys like, let's see, Colonel Vesseray, the pilot, that if a friendly ship has a target lock on the opponent, he automatically gets a target lock after he fires. He can then spend.
That's nasty.
And he can do it twice.
Yeah, fuck that guy as well. You're noticing a trend here. It's fuck the TIE Defender.
The TIE Defender was pretty high up in the meta, so to speak, for about 6 months to a year, I guess. The recent FAQ did change some of the titles a little bit to try to bring them back down to earth, so to speak, but I still think they're pretty potent ships. Would you agree?
I think it has zero effect on the game.
What were some of the changes they made? I didn't see the FAQ.
The only thing significant with TIE Defender is that the X7 upgrade that gives you a free evade token for flying 3, 4, and 5 speed maneuvers are that you cannot make contact with another ship or land on an obstacle. So it basically turns it into an actionless ship, as it should. Don't hit stuff.
Which you're trying to do anyway. Right?
Yeah, I mean that makes
kind of like a duh.
That's a good change.
So it doesn't affect the game at all for me.
All right, cool guys. I guess we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks for listening to our news segment about the X-Wing Star Wars Miniatures game. If you like it, let us know in the feedback. As always, you are welcome to contact us. Our email address is geeksboutiquelex@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on our Facebook page, Instagram account. What else we got? Twitter. We're all over the place. So just let us know. Please send us in any game questions you had about the X-Wing Miniatures game. We've been playing for a couple of years. Each of us have now, I think. And we love the game, talk about it all the time, and we'd be more than happy to talk about it with you as well.
Since I'm actually kind of the newcomer, I guess I was featured on the first episode, but I don't, I'm not really a main talker on the show. This episode, I get to ask what Zach's Zackism is for the month.
The Zackism for the month is actually a bit of inspirational commentary that I think anybody can apply to anything in life. And I actually can't steal this one directly. This is from a good friend, actually my partner at work, Staff Sergeant Scotty Bennett. And if you're going to do something, just fucking do it. Nobody ever won a Nobel Peace Prize for attempting chemistry.
All right, friends, that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in yet again, and please let us know what you think. Our social media contact information is posted in the show notes as always, and we'd love to hear from psychophants and sociopaths alike. If you would, please give us a positive review on iTunes. That'll help us move up the charts and spread the word about our super awesome show. I'd like to thank our regular listeners, and until next month, keep your powder dry.
All music for the